Right, evening colleagues, and welcome to tonight's Audit and Governance Committee. Hope everybody's well. The meeting will be live streamed to the public, and a recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council website within 24 hours of the meeting. Members and officers, please remember to switch the microphone on when speaking and off when finished, and speak directly into the microphone. Remote participants joining by Teams, please use the hands up button to indicate you have a question or a comment. Those joining by Teams, please turn your cameras on when speaking and off when finished. In-person attendees, please switch off your mobile phones or place on silent. For those members of the public, my name is Councillor Jackie Burnett. Right, we now move. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies for lateness from Councillor Farouk and the independent member, Nayaz Chowdhury, who and neither of they may not attend at all.
Okay.
Thank you. And Dev Goebel.
Okay, thank you for that. Right. Item 2, there's no minutes because we just had the meeting last week and no minutes are already. Number 3, disclosures of interest. Members are reminded that they must disclose both the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and any personal interest that they may have in any matters to be considered at the meeting, unless the interest is a sensitive interest in which events may need not disclose the nature of the interest. A member with a disclosable pecuniary interest must not further participate in any discussions of, vote on, or take any executive steps in relation to the items of business. A member with a personal interest which a member of the public with knowledge of the relevant facts would reasonably regard as so significant that it is likely to prejudice the member's judgment of the public interest must similarly not participate in any discussion of, vote on, or take any executive steps in relation to the item of business. Disclosable pecuniary interest and personal interests are defined in the Council's Code of Conduct for members and co-opted members. Are there any to disclose? No? Thank you. Item 4, Section 106, Local Government Act 1992. Those items on the agenda affected by Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act will be identified at the meeting. Any members so affected is reminded that they should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on those items. Item 5. Are there any urgent business?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Agenda item 6, reference from committees and other bodies. Are there any?
No, Chair. None received. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 7, SAF's Anti-Fraud Plan 24-25 progress update. Over to the officer. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, and thank you. And good evening, members too. For those that don't know me, I'm Darren Bowler, the Counter-Fraud Manager at the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening, and I'll be taking them individually to allow time for any questions at the end of each one, and for you to carry out your the process of noting or voting as appropriate for each one. The 3 agenda items are the progress of the anti-fraud plan for this year, the plan for next year, 25 and 26, and then 3 policies which I'll be taking together. I'm going to assume for all of them that you've all had an opportunity to read and review the plans and the policies, so I'll provide you with a verbal brief summary for the plans and add some detail to the policies. So agenda item number 7, progress update of the anti-fraud plan 2024 to 2025, which is for you to note. This update covers up to the end of January 25. The key performance indicator objectives are either met or are all on target for achieving by the end of the financial year. There has been a substantial amount of work undertaken jointly on the current National Fraud Initiative, and this work is continuing on the 7,800 matches the Council has to deal with. Further update will be provided in the end of year report, along with the outcome of the work on the Fraud Hub, which will continue alongside that. The volume of cases received under investigation and closed is broadly as expected. The fraud losses have been identified so far as £94,000, but reported through prevention, there are savings of £706,000 reported. Compliance work on low value frauds has identified a further £41,000 in additional revenue to the council. So far, 10 social properties have been recovered back to stock, and I have every confidence that the objective of 12 will be met by the end of year, and quietly hopeful that it may be exceeded. This does not include the work that we do with social housing providers within the Luton Council area. Of the 4 cases we have under investigation, 1 property has been recovered. Right to buy applications increased substantially during this year. And of the 121 applications, 1 has been declined, and a further 6 applications, including successions, are still under investigation. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions? Councillor Hussain and then Councillor Skettleborn. Councillor Hussain.
More of a comment, to be honest with you. You want to ask question first, then I can just make a comment.
Is it question, Councillor Skettleborn, for us? Thank you, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hussain. It may be my ignorance, but in paragraph 7, what is a push payment? I've not heard of that.
A push payment is a banking term for getting a payment pushed through the system quickly, basically.
So it's a bribe to somebody for getting a payment through, or?
No, it's just another form of payment to be that you do through whichever financial institution you bank with, like a bank transfer. It's just another different one. It's got some urgency to it to get it through. They're susceptible to fraud because of the nature of the speed of those transactions. That's what that references.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I've never heard of it. That's all.
Just another way of making a payment from one bank account to another.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Skettleborn.
Yes. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 14 talks about the right to buy applications and succession applications. What percent you've reviewed 121 and 4 of each? What percentage of the total applications is that?
We review all of the applications that come to us.
Okay, so is that why is that? Is that necessary to review all the applications?
It's to help the council comply with its obligations under the money laundering provisions. Because we in effect, we'll be taking money from somebody who we know is a tenant potentially, but there may be other people supporting that purchase. So we first of all we make sure that there's no fraud involved, and then we look at where the payments are coming from and try to ascertain if there are any concerns about money laundering.
Oh, so it's essentially a money laundering prevention exercise.
Primarily to prevent the loss of housing stock through a fraudulent application, because there are a number of criteria to comply with set out in the right to buy scheme regulations. And then secondly, whilst we have an existing relationship, we don't always know where people's money is coming from. So that is the secondary reasons to do that. And if we detect or suspect of any fraud or suspect of any money laundering, there will be a further investigation. So a case will be opened, and there are a few running at the moment until we get to the bottom of it. It doesn't mean that there's definitely money laundering, but we're not satisfied. So we need to ask further in-depth questions and undertake some more investigation.
Okay, so you don't get involved in the decision about whether someone's entitled to the property as such?
No, that rests with the money laundering team. We will obviously report back our concerns if there are any over either fraud or money laundering.
Okay, Councillor. Right, Helen and then Councillor Begum and then Councillor Hussain for comment if there's no more questions. Helen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 16, I'm interested in the extra 6,400 records for review. Oh, sorry, page number 7. Page 7, paragraph 16. The Herts Fraud Hub matches data sets.
Yes,
Yeah, 6,400. Is there a timescale for those being reviewed, please?
We paused those at the moment.
Mike, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. We've paused those at the moment because of the work on the national exercise. Both systems operate almost identically. The Fraud Hub is what we run every year and every quarter throughout the year. The national exercise is only every 2 years. So that means we would be slow in picking up the data. And what also the Fraud Hub will help us do is to clean the data that we see every 2 years in the national exercise. So they work very similarly, but because of the volume, we can't physically do all of those. And if we're doing the national exercise already, they're essentially almost identical matches. So we've paused those and we'll run those next quarter again once we've cleared the majority of the national exercise fraud matches, because in theory, the national exercise data will have then cleaned up all of the data for when we rerun the Fraud Hub in the next quarter. So they're symbiotic and almost identical, but not always, because we're talking about such a volume of data. There are some strange matches that happen in it just because of the volume. The system's very good, but it's just sometimes the volume is an issue.
That was my second question, which was going to be, is there any overlap with the NFI matches? And you've answered that one, thank you. So if you're going to run it again for then Q4 and NFI review is going to be complete by Q4, is there then a time scale that you try to stick to for the Fraud Hub matches?
It really depends on the different service areas and how busy they are. And we're doing it across all of the partnerships. So Luton's one of our 8 of our partners that we run that for as well. So we try to stretch across all of that volume. A lot of it is quite simple duplication in the match, where it's matched 2 people together for by way of explanation. They just need to be cleared down, but all of that takes time. Some of them is death data, and that can be cleared quite quickly. So we try to take all of the ones that we can do very quickly without too much complexity in the checking of the 2 pieces of data that is matching, and we process that. And then it's a matter of having a conversation with the service areas. What does it look like? How much capacity do they have? How much more capacity do we have to help them work through those matches? So we like to get it done, certainly before we run it again. If there's a lot of data that comes out, and Luton does generate a lot of data, sometimes we pause the next quarter till we've got rid of this. There's no point running data that's not clean against itself again, because we're going to get the same problem. So we like to clear that data, and it makes sense to pause the second quarter or the following quarter's match.
Thank you. I do remember these exercises well, having that and matched them and checked them myself over the years. So is it likely then that the next update that we get to this committee will give us perhaps some findings on the NFI work and matches and the Fraud Hub matches?
All being well, yes, and the end of year issues not slowing us down in any way.
Okay, Councillor Begum, then Councillor Malik, then Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Part of my question has been answered already, but what I wanted to know about the paragraph 14, the 121, the right to buy, is that before November? Because I assume November would have hiked up. Is that the number before or after?
These are figures up until January, so slightly different because of what happened in November with the policy changed. We saw an overwhelming number of applications. Before November, the process was that as soon as they receive a right to buy application, the right to buy team send it to us, and then we respond back. Now, so other partners also have housing stock, and there was obviously post November and the change in policy, there was a huge submission. So what we've decided to do is to change that process so that the right to buy team undertake their necessary checks to make sure everyone's eligible, and then refer those across to us. So there will be some post-November in here, but it's not representative of the large volume that we saw, because we became overwhelmed. We have an intelligence team who undertake this work of 4 members of staff, and we have 3 authorities with stock similar to yourselves. So the volume was just too much. And at that point, no one was entertaining negotiations to buy those properties. They're registering their interest, a lot of them. So we can then manage those fraud and money laundering concern investigations once we know that those people are more serious about it, and we can turn those around quite quickly. The length of time in the work it is within the right to buy team.
Question, Councillor Baker? Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Malik.
On page number 6, paragraph 10, there are some 209 cases which have been detected. Some are, you have already mentioned it, but some are still missed, around 37 cases. Could you please guide us if we are calculating all the figure, like 69 cases under investigation, 22 under with estimated losses, 17 occasionally 64 low value frauds. How about the outstanding one out of 209? Are they in a process? Are they resolved? I want to know about their status.
So we take the 209 allegations in. They're assessed. Not all of them make it to a further investigation stage. The numbers that you see there are the numbers that at that point up until the end of December were currently under investigation. So that's 69 cases. 22 of the 209 are still at referral stage, which means we need to do further work on them to assess whether we could substantiate an allegation of fraud. Also in that period, we've closed 24 investigations, separate to the 69 and the 22. And I will say that some of that 24 may be cases that were opened in the last financial year, because a case has a life of its own, and that it's not all the same length and duration. So of the 24, some of them may have been closed in this year, but started in a previous year. And that's where we calculate the fraud losses. The fraud loss is put onto a case at the time that the loss is identified and can be confirmed. And because of the nature of the investigation, often that is towards the end, not when it's closed. Sometimes it is when it's closed, but sometimes it's before we close the investigation. So if we were to engage in recovery or a prosecution, it would then stay open. So what you're seeing there is a snapshot in time of where we are with all of those cases. And the fact that we had 209 allegations reported to us means that if you add the other figures together and remove them, others obviously weren't of sufficient quality, or they could be duplicates. Sometimes we'll get 2 or 3 referrals from apparently different people or sources for the same allegation as well. So we will discount those. Some of them are things that to do with Luton geographical area that are not affecting the council. So there are lots of allegations that are closed that are absolutely nothing to do with the council at all.
On that note, because there is the amount which you have shown on paragraph 10 to recover, it's showing the losses. It's a big amount. Do you have anything to recover that amount? Because any plan B, and what's your procedure?
So I can't give you a breakdown at the moment of what that £94,000 comprises of, but because we've recovered in this year 10 properties, the fraud around a property is measured quite high because there was a publication that provided a very good academic assessment of what the misuse of a council property costs the council every year, and that majority of that figure will be made up of that notional cost of what the council would have lost by not having that property available to them. That will be the biggest share of that. So it's £48,000 is the misuse of a property. So some of those cases won't be closed, and those properties won't have. So we won't have all of those figures on there. By the end of the year, we will. So the large majority of that will be with the misuse of council property. That figure isn't always recoverable. Basically, it's saying in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, however long the period of fraud is, and the figure doesn't put a period of loss. It only puts a figure which is a national average. Is usually not recoverable because it's a historic period. We've recovered the property because it was being misused, and now a new tenant is in it. So it's unlikely that we recover those things. In occasions where we can prove a sublet, where someone's been unlawfully subletting a council property and making profit from it, then we go after them. If we can identify any other frauds where we recover money, we initiate recovery proceedings then, either civilly or criminally under the Proceeds of Crime Act, if there is a prosecution running at the same time as well. So these are very, very headline figures. There is a lot of detail, as you're probably now understanding, within all of these figures.
My question is another on that note. Do we have any policy for the future to save our, to reduce these losses? If we can do it and make some sort of a strategy or policy?
There's policies in place to recover losses. The biggest losses usually are around tenancy fraud, and it's an indication, and it's not always going to be recoverable. Where we can recover, we do, and we actively seek to recover lost funds in the shortest, most cost-effective way that we can. And that will get covered in the other two agenda items, I'm sure.
Thank you. Just a question's a bit random, but where it's proven that somebody has committed fraud and sublet, does mark go against them if at any future time they seek to seek housing? Officers are not here for that area, but I just wondered, are you able to clarify at all?
Yes, I can. In most occasions, if it's a sublet and there's a criminal offence, then they're not using that property. And under civil tenancy law, once they've started to sublet, they cannot reclaim residency and ownership, residency of that property, because it's an unexcusable breach, effectively. So by doing that, they make themselves intentionally homeless. Often, they're now living somewhere else with somebody else, or there's another circumstance. So they don't present to the council. But because they have made themselves, and the legal definition explanation is intentionally homeless, there's no recourse to being housed again by the council here. It's a matter for the council to record that, and should they approach the council in future years, then that needs to be looked at. And normally most people have to give their full address history, and at that point it should trigger. But unfortunately, not everybody is as honest as you'd expect them to be.
I just wondered whether there was sort of like a database held and maybe shared with other local authorities on that one for, you know, people that had defaulted through subletting, because the areas are so much closer nowadays than what we used to be. But are you able to answer that one at all?
Well, there is one benefit of being in the shared anti-fraud service, in that your some of the authorities nearby who hold stock are members of the shared anti-fraud service, and we hold those cases. So when we search our database, when an initial referral comes in, we will be looking to see if we've dealt with this person or that address or anything else before. And what do we know already about the allegation or referral that's just been made to us? As regards a bigger database, I'm afraid that's one for somebody else. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. You can't speak for the national fraud bit. Thank you so much. Councillor Hussain, can you come in with your comment? Thank you.
I think in light of what you just said, I mean, a couple of years ago was where subletting and somebody owned a house, they got 2 years inside. So it's quite serious. The court take it very, very seriously when it comes to that. I just wanted to, because some months back, I made a comment in here in terms of where a resident brought up in terms of subletting, and the housing had not done anything for a long time. I wanted to thank them that the matter is not resolved, but at least the residents are happy that something was done, because they had been complaining for more than 2 years that this place was sublet, and it happened to be, without saying too much, it was a sheltered accommodation, and they were really angry. So I think, you know, they do take it very seriously, and I like to thank them that they've done a fantastic job, and I hope they continue to do that, because there are desperate people living in temporary accommodation and in a hotel with their families, and these people are, you know, who have been given the privilege of a house and they're already subletting somebody else. So I think, you know, they're doing a fantastic job. So thank you very much.
So we can make sure that is minuted, your thanks, and I'm sure the officer is happy for that. And I think on that note, it's good value for money, the work. So
I'll make sure they're passed on to those doing the hard work.
Right, if colleagues can turn to page 5, the recommendation is that the Audit and Governance Committee is recommended to note the progress by officers and the shared anti-fraud service to deliver the anti-fraud plan for the councils. So noted?
Yeah.
Thank you. We now move on to agenda item A on page 10. Over to you, Nick.
Agenda item A, which is the plan for next year. The plan, I'm sure, will be familiar to you, with similarities to previous years, and the plan is found Appendix A of your bundle. I'd like to emphasise and recommend to you all the 5 publications detailed at paragraph 3 of the report. All of these publications provide exceptionally helpful advice and guidance for local authorities to prevent fraud, as well as indicating trends and vulnerabilities to the council, many of which are felt at essential frontline services. The plan has been developed with reference to all of these publications. The plan references the council's anti-fraud and corruption strategy, as well as highlighting the need to protect the council's resources for the benefit of the residents and taxpayers, and the need for an anti-fraud culture and an anti-fraud environment. It also explains the counter-fraud provision, which can briefly be summed up as proactivity to deter and prevent fraud, bribery and corruption, investigation to detect fraud, bribery and corruption, to prevent and recover losses and apply sanctions appropriately, to support and inform the council throughout the year on policy, systems, processes and controls to reduce their exposure to fraud, bribery and corruption. The objectives and key performance indicators support and measure the achievement of the plan. The key performance indicators and standards of service are set out through pages 21 to 23. Again, that's a brief summary of quite a detailed plan, but at that point, I'm happy to take any questions again, Chair.
Sorry, I called you Nick. It's Darren. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Chair, thank you.
Apologies. Are there any questions from the committee members? Councillor Underwood and then Helen and then Councillor Begum.
Thank you, Chair. See on the staffing, we will have access to 780 days of counter fraud work, an increase on the 669 days last year. I mean, that's obviously very nice. Is there a particular reason why? Because that's quite a large increase. Is that because there's a need for the extra staff?
It's twofold. One, we've had an increase in complement. We've had a member of staff return from a long period of leave, and also, I'm afraid to say, the cost has gone up. So to make that, it's an inflationary cost that's been agreed, and to compensate in some way for having to put the costs up, which are borne by us as well, we have found some extra days to help that or ease that burden.
Any more question, Councillor Underwood? Okay, Helen, over to you.
Thank you. I've got a couple, if that's okay. I was really pleased to see the work on procurement on the plan. I thought that was really positive, and I just wondered if there was a timescale for that, or that's still to be worked through. So that's my first question. I do apologise. It's page 19. It's procurement under one of the agreed projects at the top of the page.
So the first thing to say is that we've been doing a lot of work with procurement recently for various different reasons, both reactive and proactive. And whilst we've been doing that work, it's been very well received and, quite frankly, potentially needed in certain areas. So we've leveraged that across, and that will be ongoing throughout the year. And I would suggest probably for at least the next year and possibly the year after, it will become a permanent fixture and probably stay there because of, as I've just mentioned, the ever-increasing costs, the ever-increasing burden. If there are issues and concerns that need at least a health check in the way that we do the health check for the right to buys, then if that's something we can assist with at the early stage, we can stop things at the front door. It's a lot less resource intensive if that happens than later on, because once a contractor is taken up and then we discover fraud or there's been some misrepresentation in the bidding process, then if we're going to take that contract away from someone, we then have to find someone else to do that, or the procurement team has to do that, and that's a whole lot of additional work that shouldn't be taken, doesn't need to take place if we can stop it at the front door. So that's why it's there.
I think that's a really positive addition on the plan. And then my second question was going to be, you work with quite a lot of other partners. Is there anything on their plans that you think would be worthwhile us considering on the Luton plan, or are they all covered?
So the way the partners are set up, so we have partners and clients, and we only provide these plans. We provide some service level agreements, but for all plans for the whole year are only for our 8 partners, who are all local authorities. So the way that is managed, there is a board with oversight, and it's a representative from each of the 8 partners to make sure that what we're doing is right not only for them, but right for the whole of the service. And so that when they meet once a quarter, they're fully aware of what current work we're doing, what's in the pipeline, what's being planned, and it is being delivered for all of the partners. So in that way, there's an overarching guidance and also verification of the work that we're doing. So the plans are effectively shared. They're public documents anyway, and they are very broadly the same. some local authorities have particular pools and on certain aspects. Luton, Stevenage and Welwyn Garden City all have stock. So that is a resource intensive area of work for us. So that will be measured and probably very similar across the three authorities to Broxbourne or Hertsmere that don't have stock. They have a different need in other areas. So the oversight and guidance of the board ensures that what's being distributed amongst all the partners is fair and acceptable. And the one big bonus I would say about it, the cooperation between all of the members on that board from the partners means that should one partner have a sudden need for additional work that's outside of what's been scoped, then there will be a general agreement that if we have to pull resources away from another partner to support that problem in the short term, then and we can flex across that, then that will be delivered. So it's a very collegiate approach to how we deal with fraud across the whole of the partnership.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Yes, Helen? You did answer already, didn't you?
Just realised I've got one more question. Thanks, Chair. In Children's Care Services and Education Services section of the work plan on page 20, at the end of that section, it's talking about the review of planned work from 24-25, spend transport and personal transport budgets. Should there be more detail there about the Stooges recommendation?
I have absolute confidence that there will be, but not just yet. So that's a plan, an item that we've not yet fully scoped out, but that's going to be a review, a fraud review to make sure it's in the right, it's secure, it's prevented from fraud. What are the potentials for fraud? What do we see in other local authority areas? So it's a cradle to grave review of it to give it a health check on fraud. So that's in the plan, and it's in the plan to be worked out how we're going to do it. So we're going to undertake a fraud risk assessment across the whole of the service.
Begum and then Niaz. Councillor Begum.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Well, the first thing I'll say, congratulations to the team for you won an award. Is it? What's the award? What was it? TECAS award and IRRV. So congratulations on the team for that. Now my question is regarding the adult social care. On the plan, page 20 or page 7, where it says more forge closure links with safeguarding team around financial abuse. Can you explain what you mean by that, please? So page 20 of this pack and page 7 of Appendix A. I think, yes. It's the work plan and projects 25-26 table, that table.
Yes, sorry, adult care services. Yes.
But where it says forge closure links with safeguarding team around financial abuse. What do you mean by that, please?
That area, unfortunately, is one of the biggest areas that's prone to fraud, purely because authorities are giving individuals a lot of money to manage. And that money sometimes gets taken advantage of, unfortunately. So that piece of work is to review with the service what that process is. So it won't be a full fraud risk assessment. It will understand what the process is, see what's already in place in respect to fraud, and then look at how that is dealt with. And is there any weaknesses or best practice that best practice for two reasons. One, that might not be present, but also what best practice is present, so that we can share that with the rest of the partnership. So it's not a full fraud risk assessment. It's a review and understanding. We have very little work from that area here, which is a good thing potentially, but it also means because we're deeply suspicious people, I'm afraid. Why don't we get a lot of work from there? Is nothing being many things not being referred to us? Are they not being referred to us because there isn't anything to refer? So we just want to understand that a bit more. We've been here a number of years. We've had various different cases, but we've not embedded as much as we have done with other areas where that is those fraud risks are present, particularly up. We're hosted by Hertfordshire County Council, and that their budget is huge because of the geographical area they cover. So, and we see more there because of the volume than we do here. So we just want to understand that a bit more.
Got another question, Councillor
Yes.
Begum? Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is actually all of the policies that you put on there, like the anti-corruption and all those ones. This is for the whole council, I assume, or is there a sub policy following on from this policy for each of the departments, or is this covers the all departments?
Those three policies, which I'll come to next time,
Yeah.
are
And this one is separate to only to the financial.
So the document here is the plan for next year. Is
Okay.
the plan for that? These are the sorts of work that we can consider undertaking next year. Policies that follow in the next agenda item are different.
So just one more comment actually. While reading it, the whole appendixes, I think one thing we could do is a bit more stricter sanctions mentioning on there, because you don't mention what the sanctions will be. You say will be sanction, but what is it? What is it actual? The penalty? Is it a fine? What is the actual sanctions? It might be good to mention in the report. If I have missed it, I apologize, but I didn't see it.
I'll cover that in a little bit more detail in the next agenda item when we're talking about sanctions for you.
Okay, so before I go to Niaz, were you suggesting, Councillor Begum, that the recommendation is slightly amended to include? Well, are you asking for the recommendation to be slightly amended to be clearer in what areas? Because that's what I will need to capture. So can you just repeat that, please?
Is to mention what would be the penalty or more stricter sanctions. If you're mentioning in the report, it says sanctions, but we don't know what is it. Are we going to find less than £100 or £200, or what is the actual penalty on the person or organizations or people? Chair. So for example, let's say we find out someone is subletting a council house. So once we investigate, find out what exactly is the penalty, what will we do once it's proved? Other than obviously they're going to be homeless and they can't apply for council housing further. But what exactly is it? Are we going to charge them? Are we going to take them to court? Things like that, just to mention a bit. It's just, I think that's an example.
So what I'm getting, and I need to come back to Darren, you're asking for a slight amendment to the plan. Is that okay, Darren?
The problem with listing all sanctions is it depends on what the allegation is, and each allegation will have a variety of sanctions which would be different. If we talk about a council tax matter, the sanctions for that would be completely different to a tenancy fraud, and that's because they sit under different pieces of legislation. They all have a potential for a different outcome, and when those outcomes are being considered, obviously we start at the lowest one, depending on the nature, seriousness, duration of offending, and an allegation, and then it goes through a process internally of heads of service and legal, and our view as to how that then comes to fruition as to which one is chosen. But to list all of the options, we'd have to physically list all of the offences to give you all of the options. And within a document like that, it wouldn't be appropriate. So sometimes a sanction could just be saying to somebody, you've made a false housing application to the council, we've proved it's false, we're not going to do anything else other than say to you, you can't apply to this council for the next 5 years, and that would be a sanction. So
if I can interject, that would, so what you're asking about, Councillor Begin, if I've got it right, Darren, that's more in the reporting. So it's the reporting and the reports that come back to us, that's where you would be able to capture and report back the concerns that Councillor Begin is talking about. Have I got that correct?
that's correct. And in the end of the year report, you get a tabular expression for each of the different fraud areas and what's it's resulted in, and whether we've prosecuted them at court, or actually sometimes it's we've cancelled their application and not done anything potentially. There's a very broad spectrum.
Okay, so that's okay for you, Councillor Begum, that's clear on that?
Yes, thank you. And I think you mentioned about some of the other policies with housing and so on. Maybe just to mention it there, see this policy like you did on the members one. I think you said members LGA policy 2017, something like that. It might be just to mention the office so that we can go and have a look at that or something.
The policy is somewhat separate, and I'll come to that in the last item. I promise.
Thank you both. Niaz, have you got your question?
Yeah, it's anti-fraud and corruption strategy. Obviously, we know that the aim of this service is to prevent any losses, and resources are used properly for the residents.
So Niaz, I think if you can turn and speak into the mic so that Darren can hear you. You don't need to look to me, look to him, please. Thank you.
So Darren, I was just wondering that, the contractors, when they are doing their work, for example, if they are doing road work and kind of things, is it going to be checked by the local authority that how the quality of the work is and whether it is done according to the specification? And is there any involvement of anti-fraud over there for reviewing some of the work? And if they, if any resident want to make a complaint or make aware about the any issue, what is the way they can do that? If you can please explain. Thank you.
So I'll take them in reverse. So we have an email address that's published, a telephone number that's published, and a website. And if anyone wanted to report fraud to Luton Council, and they typed into any search engine report fraud Luton Council, either the council's own webpage would pop up quite high, as was ours. So there are multiple ways which people can report fraud. Sometimes they send a letter into the council, and that's then forwarded to us. So publicly speaking, we're out there, and that's we'll get a breakdown in the end of year report, but you'll see how many reports that we get in and where that's come from. So from members of staff and public, and usually there's a parity around those two figures here at the council. So there's lots of ways people can report to us. In respect of any services or outside contractors, that would be usually brought to our attention through the procurement team, because if it's a contract, then there would have been a procurement process. The surface area may raise that with procurement. The service area responsible for it could raise it direct with us, and then when we would look at it and deal with it, it would require someone to tell us that something is wrong somewhere first before we went into that. But as you'll have heard, we are doing a little bit more work this year with the procurement team to understand the nature of that work, and see where there are potentials that we can exploit some additional fraud prevention.
Thank you, Tom. I'll ask a specific question about the road work. Some of the residents are raising. This is like road work being done, but the quality is so poor that it looks like either some bitumen is just sprayed over and that's it. So if the residents want to make a complaint about it or make you aware that there is some corruption going on, then how they can do that? Can they straight contact you, or they have to go through the procurement department? Thank you.
I think that they're more than welcome to report to us, but the first thing that we would do is pick up the phone to find out which service at the council is responsible for the highways. And as we all know, as we drive down the roads, it happened to be on the way here, I saw at least 3 or 4 different teams digging up a road which was going to have to be repaired at some time. So utility providers often repair roads rather than the council. So there needs to be some understanding, I think, to start with. Who made the repair? Was it the council? And is it up to, because I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure there will be some specification if someone's dug up the council's road that there will be what needs to be put back in place. So I think we need to find the locations, refer that to the appropriate service of the council, and for that service to undertake a question from an independent member to find that out would be my response. And then we're more than happy to pick anything up that comes out of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's the Hussein.
Only to respond to, if it's highway work, if it goes more than, say, 3 days, they said they go over there, that there is a fine that local authority can ask for. So it's something. And my apologies, I've got to leave about 7:45 to go somewhere else.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments. Can I just ask, Dan, when you do the reports, and can I ask officers, if possible, can you just check the reports for acronyms? Because these are public documents and we might be using acronyms that are totally okay to us, but the members of the public won't. So if you're going to use acronym, can you just do a little index so that members of the public can understand? Yeah, this is not for us, this is for the public we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass it.
Thank you. So on that note, if we can go to recommendation 2, the Audit and Governance Committee is recommended to review and approve the anti-fraud plan for 25-26. So done.
Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. Right, we now move to agenda item 9, which is on page 24 to 63. Over to you, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is agenda item number 9, the anti-fraud policies for review and approval. There are 3 policies that form effectively a fraud suite of policies: so anti-fraud and corruption strategy, the anti-money laundering policy, and the fraud sanction and prosecution policy. And together they provide the whole council officers with an ability to answer any questions in relation to these 3 areas. So the background of the policies is set out in the report, and it can be found in your bundle between pages 24 and 27. And the council's had these 3 policies for some time, and all have been reviewed and updated as appropriate, and that's the reason they're back before you tonight. Is they have a periodic review, and they've had that review, and they're here for you to approve tonight. The respect to the anti-fraud and corruption strategy, it has been updated to include the new legislation regarding failure to prevent fraud. This is a corporate offence and bears very similar wording to the failing to prevent bribery and corruption. It's in there because it's absolutely right that it should be in there. This isn't a failure to prevent fraud happening against the council when we are the victim of fraud. It's internal. So should there be some internal corruption that's allowed fraud to happen, and we haven't put a strategy in place to prevent it. And in the policies, you'll see there is all references to training and mitigations throughout to prevent fraud. And that is one of the policies, one of the requirements that organisations should have in respect of that particular new piece of legislation. So the sanction and prosecution policy has been used operationally, but not widely across the council for various different reasons. This policy was developed in conjunction with the senior leadership team, relevant officers in legal and finance, and leads from services directly affected by the policy. It also covers the use of sanctions as an alternative to prosecution. The word sanction is a generic term. I'm going to vary from my script just a minute to cover the councillor's question from earlier. How we deal with the outcome of an investigation depends on the evidence, and we follow the evidence. And then when we get to that stage, we have to look at any mitigating factors that the person who's committed the offence, alleged to commit the offence, may have done, and also the proportionality and necessity. What are we about to levy against them? Is it proportionate to the offence that has been committed? And we don't just look at the offence, we look at the whole nature and seriousness of the offence, the duration, and why it may have happened. It may well be that there has been all the way through a full investigation, the person's been interviewed, and it doesn't always mean that because someone's been interviewed that they're going to go end up in court. It doesn't mean that. That's a part of the process for us to understand what's gone on. Sometimes there's no need for an interview and the evidence is compelling. So when we talk about sanctions, they vary across, and they are from the least sanction would be if someone's made an application, we've decided it's fraudulent, and the best thing that's happened is that we've stopped it. Why would we want to spend more time dealing with that person when we've got other matters to deal with? So that's proportionate, because we don't want to spend more of the council's money or time in dealing with something that we can quite simply deal with it. And that's how we look at them all the way up to the matter when it goes to court. And as I said earlier on, there are very much checks and balances at every stage of this process. As you heard, I referenced the senior leadership team, legal and finance, and leads from the individual services that are affected. And that's because it affects their budget. If we're going to run a court case, the money has to come from somewhere, and it will come out of that service area's budget. So we want to make sure that what we're doing isn't disadvantaging the council any further, and that there are not any other ways which are more appropriate to deal with the offending. The recovery of any money is obviously intrinsically linked to all of that decision-making process. It's not the main driver, but we want to recover that money because it's money from the public purse that's been lost and needs to come back to deal with essential services. So we look at all of the ways that we do it. It's a process and a policy that's followed by the Crown Prosecution Service. They set the gold standard for how we deal with investigations and prosecutions should we end up that way. So it's a fully national policy that we follow from central government in the guise of the Crown Prosecution Service. So yes, so it also covers the use of sanctions as alternatives to prosecution, and you can see that page 62 of your bundle. These sanctions and alternatives to prosecution when it comes to council tax fraud investigations, which also include compliance investigations that I mentioned at the very beginning in the agenda item number 7, where I think it was 40-something thousand that has been recovered. They didn't have any further sanction other than the recovery of the lost funds, amounting to 41,000. But this policy allows for consideration of two separate ways, two sanction options, both to recover the financial penalty without further legal proceedings. And these are used widely in local authorities. the difference between the two is one is lower level, and that effectively is very much like a parking ticket. It's almost the same value. It's £70, and the example would be if someone has failed to tell the council that somebody is now living with them and they're no longer liable to council tax reduction anymore because there's additional income in the household. They forgot to tell them, and it's been a year. So if there's no good reason why, other than just a failure, it's effectively a fine of £70 for failing to tell us, because it's their obligation to tell us that someone's there. And if that were to go on for 2 or 3 years, then arguably, and the legislation allows for £70 for each of the years where it was failed to be inform the council of the change in the circumstances. So that's the lower end of it. The more serious sanction is a complete alternative to prosecution. So we have to decide that there has been a criminal offence committed and that we would be progressing to the prosecution option and taking that person to court. The legislation in council tax allows us not to go to court if the person has admitted the offence. That's the most important thing. Then is prepared to pay the money back. Sorry, not to pay the money back, to accept the sanction. And that sanction is maximum of £1,000 up to 50% of what the loss to the council has been. So if the loss of the council is £2,000, then that sanction fine could be £1,000 because it's 50% of the total loss, and it can and that's up to another maximum amount of money. So they're two very good options. They're in that policy. They've not yet been used at the council, but they will be, I'm sure, at some point once the policy has been agreed this evening. Following discussion with the Revenues and Benefits team, it's anticipated there will be use of these sanctions going forward, and this will be monitored and reviewed. And that's actually been agreed with the head of service, who coincidentally is here tonight. So I'm happy to take any questions about those 3 policies that anyone may have.
Right, any questions, colleagues, on the policy? Councillor Begum.
Sorry, I apologize. I think I meant to ask the questions on this number, not the previous ones. But you answered anyway. Thank you. I think I missed the pages and I didn't see. I thought it was item together. My question now on the sham marriages and reporting. Has there been any on there? I saw somewhere the sham marriages. Let me find it. Hold on.
Page.
Sorry, did see it somewhere. I did see it might be. Oh, found it. Page 37.
Okay.
Or 10 of Appendix 1. So types of fraud. You mentioned. Has there been any reported in Luton of those?
Not aware of any being reported to us in relation to any other offences. We would normally discover that through perhaps an allegation of something to do with council tax, tenancy fraud, or a housing benefit matter, which may get reported to the council. But no, they've been included because it's a very long list of examples of fraud. But that's the only reason I can see.
Okay, thank you. I think I am aware of a few, but I can't disclose. That's what I was asking if the council was aware of you. The other one was about reporting, which relates to the previous question. If, let's say, a public or a resident knows about a fraudulent activity or some kind of corruption, how do they report without giving their full details? Because in there you mentioned about they need to give details, address, and so on. If they don't want their name or anything, they want to be anonymous, how do they report that?
So all channels allow them to be anonymous. So we take an email, a phone call, and letters that arrive into the council. So it's up to the individual whether they want to put their details on the form. If someone does put them on the form, then they are restricted on our system and protected in any event, full stop. we might engage with them to ask them if they want to be a witness. Sometimes that isn't the case. Sometimes it is the case. We take all allegations seriously while we investigate them, and we seek to protect those who provide that information, because at the end of the day, if we didn't, people just wouldn't come forward anymore.
Thank you.
Councillor Malik and then Councillor Skipperhall.
It's a general question regarding money laundering. How many cases are filed in Luton for money laundering? Are they general, and are they totally relates to businesses area? And what are the security measures we have taken to reduce money laundering in Luton?
Okay. So we may prosecute someone for a money laundering offence, but that may be to do with the fraud they committed. So by committing a fraud, on many occasions, you will commit an offence of money laundering. So if you see, and we have prosecuted people, so if you'll see a fraud offence, you will often see money laundering attached to it, because it is part and parcel of the same offence. So that's one aspect of money laundering. The other aspect, I think, that you're driving towards is the when the council is engaged with members of the public or businesses to understand where their money is coming from, and to give them a health check. So in the procurement team, if we're onboarding a contractor, for argument's sake, they will be undertaking work in relation to the validity of that company as a standard, because the council's not going to start dealing with somebody who doesn't have the business collateral to do the job that they're offering to do. So that's one area that we might see that. The other area is when we see money being paid to the council, and classically, not here, but we do know that rent accounts, particularly, and sometimes council tax accounts, are overpaid. And you have to ask the question, why would someone overpay their council tax by a considerable amount? It might be 2,000 or 3,000, and the same for rent accounts. And that's because we are aware that bank account could be used to launder funds through the council. So if you overpay your rent and then ask for a refund, when it appears back in your bank account, it's a refund from Luton Council. So there are systems and the teams that deal with things like that are acutely aware of that problem. So if they see that, they refer it to it. And sometimes we've had referrals in relation to that, and actually it hasn't turned out to be money laundering in the end. There is no report of money laundering at the council so far this year. We've refused a right to buy application on the basis that the people fail to comply with the money laundering process. And by failing to comply with it, doesn't mean that it's money laundering. It's just there isn't enough information for us to be able to take that money and give any surety, any assurance whatsoever that that's not illegal money. And sometimes it's tax evasion, money that's coming from outside the country, and we don't know how it's got here. It could be savings that's been undeclared. Again, tax issues. We need to understand where that money has come from to protect the council, because the council is responsible for it. And then lastly, the council obviously has lots of money coming into it. So the Shared Anti-Fraud Service acts as the money laundering reporting officer for the council. So we've taken that burden away from the council. We will take all anti-money laundering reports or money laundering suspicions from any member of staff that's got a concern, and then we will assess it, review it, and then report it on the council's behalf to the National Crime Agency. So we are across the piece on money laundering at the council, and we do that for all our other partners as well. So that process, the anti-money laundering policy has got our details on it. It's got the form, and it's open to all members, all officers of the council to make those reports to us. We haven't had one this year, which is good news.
Councillor Malik. Okay, Councillor Skepelhorn.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of sanctions avoiding prosecution, once we get into the court system, we're in the hands of the judiciary for sentencing and the Proceeds of Crime Act for any money that's left. So it is quite important, I agree, that we try not to get to court, because once you're there, we ain't going to see a penny.
I have sympathy with that argument, but it's not always necessarily correct. Going to court costs money. It's simple. The in-house legal team here, headed up by Sam McKeeman, I'm sure many of you know, has to daily battle with the amount of money that they have to spend to go to court on many different reasons, not just criminal, but everything they can. So that's one of the reasons. We will always seek to protect the council's interest, whatever that looks like. And sometimes protecting the council's interest, unfortunately, is going into a week, 2 week, 3 week trial to ensure that that's dealt with appropriately. And that then becomes costly. We have our own accredited financial investigator, and they deal with POCA, and we don't always have to go to Crown Court to deal with recoveries of funds. We can deal with that at the Magistrates Court. The POCA allows for us, the accredited financial investigator, once identified stolen funds, to go to the Magistrates Court and request that money is paid from the bank account that it's resting in, which we've usually frozen, to come back. And usually the person doesn't attend court. It is a sad fact that all public bodies, local authorities, are under attack from not just domestic organised criminal groups, but international organised criminal groups that are operating and seek to recover or fortunately take money from the councils. Very sadly, we've seen a rise in those type of offences affecting schools. We have, not necessarily for Luton, but we have frozen those accounts. And I was on a call today where we've got £7,000 waiting to be recovered for that. For one of the clients that we work for, and to get that back to where it belongs. The people who commit these offences are sophisticated, and if they were based in the UK and we could readily identify them and bring to court, then I think in almost all occasions we would do in a perfect world. The world isn't perfect. We have to have those other considerations, and often they are not within the jurisdiction. We have to rely on other means to deal with it. So if we can freeze a bank account and prevent the loss, or further loss, then that's what we'll do, and we'll be happy to do that and not launch on a full criminal prosecution. It's always a balance. It's a case-by-case basis, and there is plenty of guidance from both the CPS and the legal team here in particular in how we deal with those. It is very much discussed and the benefits weighed. We have a case in court for Luton this month at the Crown Court, and that's been waiting a couple of years to get to court. So it's intensive. So that's why sometimes not productive or cost effective to resort to a Crown Court trial. Though do when we need to.
Yes, slight declaration of interest in that is I work for the CPS and I know how much council costs. Second question, it's in this gorge for bribery. I just wonder, do we need to put a warning about using US-based companies, given that the current incumbent of the White House has just declared that US companies are allowed to use bribery to obtain contracts overseas?
It's all right with you, Chair. I'm going to remain politically neutral on that question in relation to our cousins across the pond. But the legislation is actually the anti-bribery legislation. Some of the great British companies, unfortunately, have fallen foul of it, and so big businesses included. I think personally, when you read the spirit of the legislation and when you're looking at legislation, the spirit in which it is enacted, it gives you a good idea of what the problem was in the first place that it's trying to deal with. And it is dealing with big business. There is overseas corruption with big businesses in relation to contracts being dealt with in other countries where the culture of anti-bribery corruption isn't as strong as it is here. So that is to dissuade large corporate companies and other international companies from getting involved in it. Unfortunately, the way the legislation is written, it captures local authorities and other corporate bodies who have no intentions of getting involved in that. It's not about an individual of an organisation, and I'm being that in its broadest terms. I'm not being specific about local authorities here, because there are people that take bribes in all walks of life, and they get caught in that as well. We need to make sure that we're failing to prevent it. It's about an organisational thing. It's like this failure to prevent fraud. It's about the organisation having a good culture and being anti these types of activity and preventing it from happening in the first place by having that good culture and the training and the processes and the safeguards in place. So we follow that best practice. Unfortunately, because others have gone before us and have not, that's why we're now captured. We are where we are, and I'm quite convinced that any allegations of bribery and corruption will be very minor, and we will see very few.
Comment. Okay.
So if there's any other questions, I'll wait.
Mr. Underwood's question.
Thank you, Chair. Cyber dependent crime and cyber enabled fraud. I guess that must be quite a growing area. How do you work with the council's IT department? So what's their responsibility? What's your responsibility?
So the IT department, to prevent it happening, should it happen, then we get involved. In simple terms, it doesn't have to be sophisticated. Very sad to say that most of and if we bring it down to its lowest form, because usually that's what we experience, a full-on cyber attack, denial of service and all those sort of things isn't fraud for us to deal with, and the firewalls and all the sorts of things that the IT team deal with and put in place will protect that. The most common thing that we will see, it was mentioned earlier on about push payments and things like that. It's emails and contact from people saying, we've had a problem with the bank, we've had to change the bank account, can you pay that invoice to a different bank account? And that then gets paid to the bad guys because they're sitting behind an email address. It won't go away because it's simple, straightforward, and many emails will be sent out. I am aware of a particular attack where the cyber element has managed to get inside someone's email account and has created folders within folders. And any incoming demands for invoices, they look at in a different time zone, if that makes sense. So they're intercepting them and putting them somewhere else. And then overnight, that email will magically reappear in the bursars or the finance team's inbox, because they've got control of an individual's email account, so they can see what's going on, and will ask them to pay it to a bank account. They won't say pay it to a different bank account. They'll have changed the details in the body of the email or the attachment. So that's very sophisticated. That we see, or simply just that. That's the most that we would probably encounter on a regular basis, and it's only a variation of that same request arriving by letter. Some argue there's nothing new in fraud. Others say there's always something evolving, it's slightly changing, and sometimes they go back to where they started from and use the same method just in a different way. So, but they're the two kind of cyber things that we see.
Okay. Comment, Councillor Skipper-Halls?
Yes. About 5 or 6 years ago, the Home Office ran a very large anti-sham marriage operation around Bedfordshire in particular, but also Hertfordshire. We were dealing with almost a case a week. Since that operation, it's closed down a lot of routes for sham marriages, so we don't see quite so many coming through the court system. But yeah, 5, 6 years ago, there was a major operation by the Home Office to crack down on it. So that's possibly why we don't see so many come through, because they closed all the sort of organisations that were set up to create them, and they were either doing time or back in their home countries. But that's why there's less, I suspect, now, because it was a major operation. We actually had a separate department within our office solely dealing with those cases.
Thank you. One comment with regards to the question that was posed by my colleague, Darren, about cyber. I think it may be useful, Kanshan, that we pick this up, because with my accounts add-on, I would always be looking for a purchase order before I pay anything. But I think it's useful for us as elected members to get a better understanding of the challenges out there. I think I mentioned it, I did a training and they said private sector did pay a few millions based on a deep fake. So if that's the level of sophistication now that we're dealing with, given what Darren said, how they've been able to come in, and one would have thought there's a lot of high security to stop that happens. I think we need as a group to be more consciously aware of the cyber and AI risk that is now part of everyday life. So can you pick that up with Dev if we haven't done it? And I think it's something maybe as a separate item in the work plan, can we look at? Because this is something we're going to be on the AI risk we need to be mindful of, and how it's being used. So can I leave that with you, Kanshan, please? Thank you. Right, colleagues, if we can go to page 24 and recommendation, paragraph 3, the Audit and Governance Committee is recommended to 1, review and approve the Council's anti-fraud and corruption strategy as set out at Appendix A. 2, review and approve the anti-money laundering policy as set out at Appendix B. 3, review and approve the fraud sanction and prosecution policy as set out at Appendix C. Do we accept the recommendations?
Yeah.
Thank you. We now move to, messing about with a pen. We now move to agenda item 10, public interest report, housing pension appeals. Who's presenting that? Okay.
Good evening. Deb Fensom, Head of Revenues and Benefits. So the Ombudsman contacted the Council on behalf of a customer who stated that they had been waiting for a response to their appeal for 7 years. The Council at the time provided evidence to the Ombudsman to show that they had been in regular contact with the customer throughout this time. But due to staffing absences and historic restructure issues, a backlog developed in processing housing benefit appeals, as well as that the Appeal Service and Evaluation Tribunal also changed the way submissions were dealt with. They separated the housing benefit element from the council tax reduction, which resulted in double the work, different legislation, tribunals and time periods. The council tax reduction appeals take priority over the housing benefit work due to the way that the valuation tribunal set down the regulations. In October 2020, 2 additional appeal officers were recruited into the team, taking the team to 3.5 full-time equivalents. Also noting that training those officers in this line of work can take considerable time due to the complexities. The team also saw a vast increase of the volume of council tax reduction appeals received, and these took priority. With COVID, this all added to the problems the team were experiencing. However, this doesn't detract from the unacceptable delay in writing a submission and presenting it to the Appeals Service Tribunal. This submission was finally sent to the Appeals Service in October 2023, and a date was received in November 23 for the case to be heard. The council won the appeal against the customer. The council reported back to the Ombudsman that the backlog of appeals would be dealt with within 6 months from the date of their final report, which was the 25th of October. As of today, I can confirm that all cases which needed to be actioned have been sent. We are now waiting for hearing dates where necessary, but those are out of our control. The local authority received confirmation from the local government ombudsman on the 25th of February 25 that they were satisfied we had met with all the recommendations and actions, and thanked us for all the work that we had undertaken in actioning the recommendations. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the report, colleagues? Helen, and then Councillor Underwood, and then Councillor Begum. Helen first.
Thank you, Chair. You've answered my first question, which was what's the current status? So thank you for answering that one. I was keen on page 65 in paragraph 14. I was keen to understand more about the efficiencies that the contractor had identified when working in the team, and whether they're being taken forward.
Yeah. So the contractor obviously had vast experience in this line of work, and everyone deals with work a different way. And he sort of presented to us the way in which we could record the information, prepare the bundle that we have to send to the valuation tribunal, and provided some guidance. And the team have taken that forward, and it has saved an invaluable amount of time in us being able to deal with these outstanding appeals.
Underwood?
Helen's asked my question, Chair. Thank you.
Two was on the same wavelength. Councillor Begum.
Thank you, Chair. I want to share a case study so you'll understand my question. So I had a resident who could not speak English or read English, and she has been trying to get there was a problem with the housing benefit. No one was listening to her, and she kept saying they don't listen to me. And obviously the council were constantly sending her letters, but she's not understanding any of the letters, because she couldn't read English. She's a very elderly lady, so she couldn't read, she couldn't understand it. But they keep giving her, oh, you haven't paid the whole process, and then you went to tribunal. She reached out to me and requested to meet with an officer. I think it was dealt with. It was a year ago. So it was dealt with, and then luckily the officers listened to me and we sorted it out. So how many of those cases do we have out of the 68? I think you had appeals. And how many more do we know the figure, or how many of those people that are behind payment or haven't paid, or we need to take them to tribunal, are those who are not understanding what is being sent to them?
We don't have that level of detail. All I can say is that if there was a housing benefit appeal and it was as a result of an overpayment, any recovery action at the point that it was recognised would be put on hold until the outcome of that hearing, until a decision had been made.
I understand that. I think the case that we won, we said the letter, whatever was sent to the person, but if they are not responding, could it be that they are not understanding what is being sent to them? So that's my question. I'm sure there's a lot of people in Luton that don't understand English or read English, especially our elderly generation.
Yeah, we do have staff within the service that are able to interpret. We do have a facility for the individual to come in with a representative for us to sit down with them on a one-to-one basis to explain the decision and to provide any support that was given. In this particular case that took so long to go to the tribunal, this customer had 3 different appeals. So it was going backward and forward, obtaining the information that we needed. They was only providing a bit of the information, not the full information. And so it was a case that was out of the norm. Normally you don't get a customer, that has 3 appeals that run concurrently.
Thank you. I think I was just a bit concerned that we might have a lot of residents that actually don't understand the letters that get sent through to them, but they might not even know it's a letter. So I just wanted to understand what the process in for that one. Because I don't know about others. I do get many residents that actually come to me, and then I go to the officer saying, can we sit down so I can translate what is being said? Luckily, I speak 4 languages that come in handy for me.
I just want to be clear, there's a bit in your presentation you said, as of some date in February. Is that in the report? I'm trying to find the paragraph where it says February and I cannot see it.
Sorry, no, it doesn't specifically say as of February that all the appeals have been cleared.
So for the minute, as it's not in the report, I want it properly recorded because I wouldn't want us to be accused of not doing our job effectively.
Yeah.
So can you repeat slowly so the minute taker can write it down? So as of today, which is the 4th of March, you can say as of whatever date in February, Is that okay, Marie? Yeah. Right. So if you can just repeat that, please.
Yep. So as of today, the 4th of March, all housing benefit appeals that needed actioning and sent to the appeal service have been sent off.
Thank you. Right, so colleagues, can we now go to paragraph 2? Recommendations. The Audit and Governance Committee is recommended to note the report. Do we so note?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for reporting that. We now move to agenda item 11. Did the light just come on then? Oh, Treasury Management half-year report. And we've got somebody on Teams, I believe. Francis?
Yes, that's
over
me.
to you. Thank you for those who's going. Have a good evening. Over to you, Francis. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, and it'll be my light that just came on. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Francis Austin. I'm a financial consultant, and I'm covering at the moment the chief accountant's role. So this report is one of the periodic monitoring reports, this one for the 6 months. It's required by the Council's Treasury Management Strategy and is also good practice under SIPMA's Prudential Code. I'll just draw attention to some of the conclusions that the report draws. So one of them is that in the current economic certainty, we're still on, even though it's currently quite a lot of economic uncertainty, we're still on track for most forecasts. And in the current economic climate, the council is advised to keep investments short term, but look for opportunities to gain value from investments for up to 1 year. The report also notes a reduction in the estimate of capital expenditure, which has caused a reduction in the need to borrow and therefore reduced the council's capital financing requirement. And as a result of that, 2 of the key thresholds, which are the operational boundary and the authorised limit for external debt, do not require adjustment because the downward trend there has been favourable and we've got plenty of headroom on those limits. I would also note that on no occasion during the first 6 months of 24-25 have any of the approved limits within the annual investment strategy been breached. And finally, I'll just draw the point that the report concludes that the council has been fully compliant with the Treasury and the prudential limits. So the committee is asked to note this report and refer it to council as part of the procedures in the treasury management strategy.
Colleagues, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Begum, go ahead.
Okay, I did have 6 questions, but she and Francis answered one already. My first question was, I won't ask all of them. Is it okay if I email the rest and ask 2? Because he's falling asleep.
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. You're gonna ask the question via email. Have I got that correct?
Is that okay with everyone?
Okay. All right. Any questions from colleagues? Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The report is for half year ended 30th September 2024, Francis.
Yes.
And the capital expenditure position is given on the report.
Yes, and that's at that date. So that's in paragraph 30.
Okay, it's on page 71, paragraph 31 is the capital expenditure for 24-25, original estimate and revised estimate.
Yes.
A significant variance between original and revised. It's like 54% for general fund and HRA for 48%. Any clarification can be given for those?
So this is due to slippage, which is the movement of planned capital expenditure from the current financial year to the next financial year. So what it's saying is that the current progress on the capital programme is behind what was forecast when the budget was set, and that's been something that's gone on and been reported to the executive via the quarterly monitoring reports, which have shown this slippage building up. So there was slippage reported in the first quarter, the second quarter, and further slippage reported in the quarter that went to the executive yesterday. They were at a lesser pace than this. I haven't got any further details that I can offer because it depends on what particular schemes that are there. I would just say that in the executive reports that I've just referred to, it does list the schemes that have slipped. So how that makes up that total.
Thank you, Francis. Do you think it's because of kind of budgetary slack been introduced, and that is why the significant variance is there? And another thing, I was just wondering that whether because it's nearly a year past, the whole year is finished nearly. There's only a few days left. Could not be possible that the actual amounts could be given on the report as well? Thank you.
For the current figures, the reason that they've not been incorporated here is because they hadn't actually been to the executive, and those figures only went to the executive yesterday. So it would have been just jumping ahead of that to bring them here. They hadn't been finalised at the point that this report was put forward, and I'm sorry I didn't bring those figures with me to bring out now. This report tries to capture the picture at the 6th month part, and I must apologise for the lateness of this because obviously we're in March now and this is a report referring back to September, and that delay was caused by the work that was going on in finance to set the budget, which was proving quite fraught, and this became behind schedule. Sorry, on the first point about the slippage, Luton has a history of slipping on the capital programme, and it is an area that we are looking to improve, and clearly it does have an impact, which is ironically positive if you haven't got to fund this, but obviously we need to be on top of that in terms of what we borrow, because we don't want to borrow for things that we're not actually spending and incurring costs of doing that. But in terms of delivering, obviously it is an area to look at and push to improve the progress against this and to get these schemes completing a higher percentage than is shown here, and finance is aware of that.
Another question?
Yes.
You do, yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Any possibility, Francis, that in future, so like we can have a detailed variance analysis for any slippage, that would be very helpful for us to understand that what's going on, in which areas is the most variances are. Thank you.
Yes, I mean that's a table that's already produced for the monitoring report that goes to the executive for capital and revenue. So I will see what can be done about including that within here, particularly where there is significant slippage like this.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Helen.
Thank you. Yeah, I was interested in the slippage as well, so I would find that very, very helpful. And my other question was going to be, I'm conscious that the figures changed, or we had the incorrect figures on the first report which came out to us. And I think I'd just like some assurance, Austin, that there's a quality assurance in place for reports with financial figures on them when they come out, because obviously we want to be able to rely on them and have informed discussion about them. So I'm very grateful for the updated figures that did come out, but I ask that some quality assurance is done before they do the first time.
Yes, that's a valid point, and it was part of the double checking of this that picked that up, but it shouldn't have got out in the first place. And I do very much accept that, and we will do what we can to make sure we do improve on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. I just wondered, in moving forward, is it possible for us to have this report on a quarterly basis? Because we can't make any difference now in feedback because we're at the end of the financial year now.
Yes, it is on a quarterly basis, and this report, as I said earlier, is late, and it should have been much earlier than this, but the setting of the budget slowed us in producing it. So I will take that back as well.
Okay, so colleagues, if we move to recommendations, the Audit and Governance Committee is recommended to 1, approve the submission to full council and executive the mid-year report on Treasury management for the half year ended the 30th of September 2024, which summarises and reviews the Council's Treasury management activities, along with changes required to prudential indicators for capital expenditure, capital financing requirements, and gross borrowing. 2, note that there has been no new long-term borrowing between April to September 24, as shown on Appendix A. And the next 3rd, note that the council did not breach any of its prudential limits. Do we so agree and note?
Yeah.
At note, colleagues, I think we have come to the ends of business for this municipal year. Yay! So I will see you after May. We have really worked hard, and thank you for all your due diligence and scrutiny and questions, colleagues. Have a good spring. Thank you.